A little after midnight on the 3rd of December 1984, in the crowded city of Bhopal in central India, hundreds of thousands of people were asleep. Near the railway station, packed tight around the walls of a pesticide factory, families lay in small homes with the windows open against the warm night. And while they slept, a tank inside that factory was heating up, its pressure climbing, until a relief valve lifted and a heavy, invisible cloud of poison began pouring silently out over the neighborhoods, drifting low along the ground, into the houses, into the lungs of sleeping children. By morning, thousands were dead, not from an explosion, not from fire, from a gas most of them never saw. And here's the part that turns a tragedy into a warning. This factory had 6 separate safety systems designed to stop exactly this from happening. On that night, not one of them was working. We'll get to why. To understand Bhopal, you have to understand what the plant was for. Union Carbide, a large American chemical company, had built a factory in Bhopal to manufacture pesticides, part of India's push to grow more food and protect its crops. It was, at first, a source of pride, a modern, advanced Western operation bringing jobs and technology to the region. To make its pesticide, the plant used a chemical called methyl isocyanate, or MIC, and this is the substance at the heart of everything that followed. MIC is extraordinarily dangerous. It is highly toxic, and it is violently reactive. So reactive that it will react with water and even with itself, releasing heat as it goes. A chemical like that has to be handled with enormous, unbroken care, kept cold, kept dry, kept isolated. At Bhopal, roughly 40 tons of it were stored in large underground tanks, and in the years before the disaster, the care that MIC demanded was quietly being taken away. The flaw at Bhopal was not one broken part. It was a slow, deliberate erosion of every layer of protection, driven by money. By the early 1980s, the plant was losing money and the company was considering closing or selling it. In that climate, budgets were cut and cut again. Experienced staff left and were replaced by fewer, less trained workers. Maintenance was deferred, and crucially, the safety systems that made storing a chemical like MIC survivable were allowed to fall apart, one by one. Consider what was supposed to protect that tank. The MIC was meant to be kept refrigerated near 0 degrees Celsius because cold slows its reactions and buys time if something goes wrong. To save on running costs, the refrigeration unit had been switched off entirely. There was a device called a vent gas scrubber, meant to neutralize escaping gas with caustic soda. It was down for maintenance. There was a flare tower, meant to burn off gas that got past the scrubber. It was out of service. There was a water spray system to knock down a rising cloud. It couldn't reach high enough to matter. And most heartbreaking of all, there was a siren, meant to warn the surrounding neighborhoods, and it had been turned off, so as not to alarm the public with the plant's frequent, smaller leaks. It's worth knowing that 2 years earlier, in 1982, the company's own engineers had audited this plant and flagged dozens of hazards, warning explicitly that a major toxic release was possible. The warning was on paper. The systems were still broken. On the night of the 2nd of December, a routine task was underway. Workers were washing out a set of pipes with water. Normally, a simple metal disc called a slip blind would be inserted to positively block that water from traveling anywhere it shouldn't. On this night, for reasons tied to the same neglect that ran through everything, that blind was not in place. And so water from that ordinary cleaning job found its way through leaking valves and lines into the tank holding 40 tons of MIC. This is the single worst thing that can happen to that chemical. The moment water met MIC, a runaway reaction began, an exothermic reaction, meaning it produced its own heat. And that heat drove the reaction faster, which produced more heat in a vicious, accelerating loop. Inside the tank, the temperature climbed far past its limits, and the pressure surged. Around 11 at night, an operator noticed the pressure reading was high, and there were reports of a leak, of eyes beginning to sting. But with the refrigeration off, there was no cold to slow the reaction. And with the scrubber and flare down, there was nothing to catch what came next. The tank was now a bomb of a different kind, building toward release, with every safety net that should have caught it already gone. A little after midnight, the pressure inside the tank became too great to contain, and the relief valve lifted. What came out was a mixture of MIC and other toxic gases, and somewhere between 20 and 30 tons of it escaped into the night air over roughly an hour. Workers tried desperately to bring the failed systems online, tried to start the scrubber, tried to find a way to contain it, but the systems were not functional, and there was nothing to be done. The gas was heavier than air, so it did not rise and disperse. It sank and spread low across the ground, rolling out from the plant and into the densely packed settlements pressed right up against its walls. And the siren that should have screamed a warning stayed silent, so the people most exposed, the families in those homes, had no alarm, no instruction, nothing. They woke, if they woke at all, to burning eyes, to searing throats, to a terrible breathlessness, in the dark, not knowing what was happening or which way to run. Many never woke. Estimates of the dead vary widely and painfully, but thousands died in the first hours and days, and the toll over the following years climbed into the tens of thousands, with hundreds of thousands more left with lasting injury. It is remembered as the worst industrial disaster in human history. What makes Bhopal so devastating to study is that, unlike a bridge or a building, there was no exotic engineering failure to unravel, no subtle miscalculation hidden in a drawing. Everything that failed was known, and every safeguard that was missing had been removed on purpose. The refrigeration that was switched off, the scrubber and flare left broken, the sirens silenced, the safety audit ignored. None of these were accidents. They were the visible residue of a decision repeated over years to treat safety as a cost to be minimized rather than the entire point of running such a plant at all. The legal aftermath was long and for most survivors deeply unsatisfying, a settlement that many felt fell far short of the harm, and a decades-long fight for justice and cleanup that in many ways continues to this day. But Bhopal did change the world's understanding of industrial risk. It forced a global reckoning with how hazardous plants are run near where people live, drove new laws on chemical safety and community right to know, and became the permanent, unavoidable case study in what happens when the layers of protection around a dangerous process are dismantled to save money. The lesson it left is brutally simple. Safety systems are not decoration. They are the only reason a plant like that is allowed to sit beside a sleeping city at all. What haunts about Bhopal isn't a single dramatic mistake. It's that every layer was defeated in advance, quietly, on ordinary days, by people deciding that this cost could be trimmed, that this repair could wait, that this alarm could stay off. Any one of those systems, working that night, might have changed the number of dead. All of them had been allowed to fail before the crisis ever began. So here's the question worth sitting with. In the systems around you that are supposed to protect people, how many of the safeguards are actually working right now? And how many are just assumed to be, quietly switched off to save a little, waiting for the one night they're needed? Tell me in the comments. Next time, we're going to a calm sea on a bright morning, and a ship that was called practically unsinkable, brought down not by the thing everyone feared, but by a door. If you like disasters explained properly, with the engineering laid bare, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. See you in the next one.